Maven Collins, 34. I never imagined my son's life would have a price tag, or that my own parents would deem it too expensive. The day they refused to help with Ethan's $85,000 life-saving treatment after spending $230,000 on my sister Kendall's fairy tale wedding wasn't just betrayal, it shattered our family forever and revealed that blood loyalty had always been conditional in ways I never suspected. Before I dive into this heartbreaking family story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. If this beginning already has you shocked, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any other wound, and as you'll see in my story, karma has a way of delivering the most unexpected justice. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in Oak Ridge, Connecticut, in what I believed was the picture-perfect American family. My parents, Richard and Eleanor Collins, built their wealth through a chain of luxury car dealerships across New England. Dad was the charismatic businessman, Mom the meticulous planner who maintained our family's social calendar and reputation. Our sprawling colonial home hosted countless neighborhood gatherings and family events, projecting an image of success and unity that made us the envy of our community. From childhood, the contrast between my sister Kendall and me was impossible to ignore. 3 years younger, Kendall inherited Mom's classic beauty, tall blonde and effortlessly graceful, while I took after my grandmother with auburn hair, freckles and a more athletic build. But the differences extended far beyond appearance. Kendall excelled in activities our parents valued: piano recitals, beauty pageants, and social events. I preferred science experiments, competitive swimming, and reading in quiet corners of our home. Kendall is our social butterfly, Mom would tell guests at parties, beaming with pride. And Maven is our free spirit, she'd add with a tight smile that never quite reached her eyes. That phrase, free spirit, was their polite way of saying I didn't fit the mold they'd created for their daughters. I learned early on that in the Collins family, certain paths received more approval than others. Despite this underlying tension, I genuinely loved my sister. We shared whispered secrets during childhood sleepovers, and defended each other against neighborhood bullies. In those unguarded moments, away from our parents' expectations, we found genuine connection. But as we entered our teens, the cracks in our relationship began to widen. Kendall embraced her role as the golden child, while I increasingly questioned the family values that seemed to prize appearance over substance. At 18, I made my first major break from family expectations by choosing to attend Michigan State University instead of my parents' alma mater, Yale. "You're throwing away a legacy," Dad had shouted during our most heated argument. "We've planned your future since before you were born," but I was determined to build my own path, even if it meant disappointing them. Michigan brought me freedom, academic fulfillment, and most importantly, Noah Parker, a brilliant engineering student with kind eyes and unwavering integrity. We fell in love during sophomore year, bonding over late-night study sessions and shared dreams of creating innovative medical technology. Noah's family history of heart disease had inspired his interest in medical engineering, though I didn't understand then how personally that mission would touch our lives later. When I brought Noah home for Thanksgiving during our junior year, my parents' disapproval was immediate but subtle. They were polite, even charming at times, but I caught the meaningful glances they exchanged when Noah discussed his middle-class upbringing and public school education. "He seems dedicated," was my mother's careful assessment afterward, the faint praise more damning than any criticism. After graduation, Noah and I moved to Minneapolis for his medical engineering position. We married in a simple ceremony at a lakeside park, a wedding my parents attended, with rigid smiles and minimal participation. They contributed a modest check that seemed designed to make a point about their disapproval rather than to help us celebrate. Kendall served as my maid of honor, but even she seemed uncomfortable, caught between loyalty to me and our parents' obvious disappointment. When I became pregnant with Ethan 2 years later, I hoped my parents might soften. A grandchild changes everything, friends assured me. The news was met with restrained enthusiasm, and a baby shower organized by my mother that felt more like a social obligation than a celebration. Still, I believed that once they held their grandson, natural affection would overcome their reservations about my choices. Ethan Alexander Parker was born on a snowy January morning in 2018, beautiful and perfect, with Noah's thoughtful eyes and my auburn hair. As I held him in the hospital, I felt a fierce love and protection I'd never experienced before. Looking at his tiny face, I made a silent promise: the conditional love I'd grown up with would never touch him. He would be valued for exactly who he was, not for how well he fulfilled predetermined expectations. What I couldn't know then, cradling my newborn son, was that this promise would be tested in ways I could never have imagined, that my parents' conditional love would eventually force an impossible choice, that my sister's role in our family dynamic would take a devastating turn, and that the very foundation of everything I believed about family loyalty was about to crumble beneath my feet. Kendall's engagement to Bradley Whitfield III came as no surprise to anyone in our social circle. The son of a prominent Boston banking family, Bradley embodied everything my parents valued: Ivy League education, family connections, and old money. Their relationship had been carefully nurtured, with my parents' enthusiastic support from their first meeting at a charity gala 3 years earlier. The engagement announcement arrived via an elaborate box delivered to our Minneapolis home. Inside was a hand-calligraphed card and a miniature bottle of Dom Perignon. The Collins and Whitfield families joyfully announced the engagement of their children, it read, followed by a note from my mother: "This will be the society wedding of the year. We're counting on your support, Maven." That phrase, "counting on your support," carried the weight of unspoken expectations. In Collins' family language, it meant conformity, enthusiastic participation, and absolutely no disruption to their carefully orchestrated plans. I called to congratulate Kendall, genuinely happy that she'd found someone who seemed to make her happy, even if Bradley's personality reminded me uncomfortably of our father. "You'll be my maid of honor, of course," Kendall said, less a question than a statement of fact. "And Ethan will make the most adorable ring bearer. Mom's already talking about getting him a custom-tailored tuxedo." Ethan was barely 2 years old at the time, just learning to form sentences and navigate our home on wobbly legs. The thought of training him to walk down an aisle carrying an expensive ring seemed absurd, but I kept my concerns to myself. "We'd be honored," I replied instead. What followed was 14 months of increasingly extravagant wedding planning that quickly spiraled beyond anything I could have imagined. My parents rented the entire Rose Cliff Mansion in Newport, Rhode Island, a Gilded Age palace overlooking the Atlantic, for 3 full days. The guest list expanded to 350 people, many of whom I suspected Kendall barely knew. Every weekend brought new demands for my involvement in tastings, fittings, and planning sessions that required expensive flights from Minneapolis to the East Coast. "We need you here for the menu tasting next Saturday," my mother would call to inform me. "Your sister needs your support on this important decision." When I explained that Noah had an important presentation that weekend and I needed to stay with Ethan, her disappointment was palpable. "Family obligations should come first, Maven. We're only asking for a few months of dedication to your sister's special day." A few months became a full year of mounting expenses and expectations. My parents paid for first-class flights when I did attend events, booked luxury hotel suites, and casually covered 5-figure deposits for venues and vendors without blinking. The bridesmaid dresses alone cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and my mother insisted on a pre-wedding cosmetic package for all bridesmaids that included professional teeth whitening, facial treatments, and hair extensions. During one rare moment of privacy at the bridal shower, I found Kendall alone in the venue's powder room, staring at her reflection with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Is everything okay?" I asked, genuinely concerned. She startled slightly, then composed herself. "Of course. Everything's perfect. Mom and Dad have thought of everything. But is it what you want, all this? I gestured vaguely to encompass the extravagance surrounding us. A flicker of something doubt perhaps crossed her face before she smiled. It's what a Whitfield Collins wedding should be. Bradley's family has expectations, and you know how Mom and Dad feel about maintaining appearances. I wanted to press further, to ask if beneath all the designer labels and champagne fountains, she was truly happy, but we were interrupted by my mother calling for Kendall to cut the custom-designed shower cake that had been flown in from a celebrity baker in New York. The expenses continued to mount visibly. A custom wedding gown from a Parisian designer, $28,000. A 10-piece orchestra for the ceremony, and a 16-piece band for the reception, $45,000. Crystal glassware and custom china purchased rather than rented, $22,000. Rare orchids flown in from Thailand for the centerpieces, $15,000. By the time the actual wedding week arrived, the total had reached a staggering $230,000, a figure my father mentioned with an odd mixture of complaint and pride during his toast at the rehearsal dinner. That's a starter home in most places, Noah whispered to me as we listened to my father detail the investment they'd made in Kendall's perfect day. Or a college education, I whispered back, thinking of the educational fund we'd just started for Ethan. The wedding itself was undeniably spectacular. Kendall looked radiant in her couture gown as she floated down the aisle on our father's arm. Ethan, despite my concerns, managed to toddle down the runner with the ring pillow, earning adoring coos from the assembled guests. The reception featured 5 courses of gourmet cuisine, flowing champagne and fireworks over the Atlantic that reportedly cost $18,000 for 12 minutes of illumination. Throughout it all, I played my role, the supportive sister, the attentive maid of honor, the grateful daughter. I gave the expected speech about sisterly bonds and beautiful futures. I danced when expected and posed for countless professional photographs. But watching my parents beam with pride as they showcased their perfect daughter and her perfect wedding, I couldn't shake a growing unease. That night, as Noah and I collapsed in our hotel suite after ensuring Ethan was soundly asleep, I voiced the thought that had been haunting me throughout the celebration. $230,000, I said quietly. Do you know what kind of security that could provide for a family, for a child's future? Noah pulled me close. Different priorities, I guess. Your parents see this as an investment in social standing. But what does that really buy you, in the end? I asked, not really expecting an answer. Neither of us could have predicted then that this question would return to haunt us all too soon, or that the contrast between my parents' spending priorities would become not just a philosophical difference but a matter of life and death for our little family. The first sign that something was wrong with Ethan came just 3 months after Kendall's wedding. He'd been unusually tired for several days, falling asleep during playtime, and showing little interest in his favorite activities. As a typically energetic 3-year-old, this sudden lethargy immediately concerned us. When purple-red bruises appeared on his legs, despite no injuries, my maternal instincts screamed that something was seriously wrong. Our pediatrician's face grew grave as she examined the unusual bruising and ordered immediate blood tests. The following 24 hours became a blur of medical terms, hospital corridors, and mounting fear. The diagnosis struck like a physical blow: aplastic anemia, a rare and serious condition where the body stops producing enough new blood cells. Ethan's bone marrow is failing, the hematologist explained gently. His body isn't making the blood cells he needs. That's why he's tired, bruising easily, and getting frequent infections. Noah, with his background in medical engineering, immediately began researching treatment options, while I sat by Ethan's hospital bed, watching him sleep beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. My mind kept circling back to one terrifying thought: we could lose him. The specialists outlined our options. The standard treatments, immunosuppressive therapy and blood transfusions, might help temporarily, but offered no guarantees. For a child as young as Ethan with such a severe case, a bone marrow transplant represented his best chance for a full recovery. But finding a perfect match outside immediate family was challenging, and the procedure itself carried significant risks. Noah and I were tested immediately, praying one of us would be a suitable donor. The crushing disappointment when neither of us matched was followed by desperate hope as we expanded testing to other family members. My sister Kendall and her new husband were traveling through Europe on their extended honeymoon and couldn't be reached immediately. My parents agreed to be tested but seemed oddly detached from the urgency of the situation. "These medical people always exaggerate," my father said during a brief phone call. "Colin's men are fighters. He'll bounce back." Their casual dismissal felt like another betrayal. This wasn't a childhood illness that would pass with chicken soup and rest. This was our son's life hanging in the balance. While they minimized his condition, Ethan continued to deteriorate. Each day brought new complications, fevers that spiked dangerously, transfusions that offered only temporary relief, and the constant terror of life-threatening infections his weakened immune system couldn't fight. One afternoon, as I sat beside Ethan while he napped, his small body connected to monitors and IV lines, the specialist requested a meeting with Noah and me. Dr. Abernathy was a leading pediatric hematologist with decades of experience treating rare blood disorders. Her expression was serious but not without hope as she outlined a new possibility. "There's an innovative treatment protocol being developed at Johns Hopkins," she explained. "It combines gene therapy with a modified bone marrow transplant procedure. For cases like Ethan's, where finding a perfect match is difficult, it reprograms partially matched donor cells to work more effectively. The results in similar cases have been remarkable. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. So this could cure him completely." "The early data is extremely promising," she confirmed. In the most recent trial, 82% of children with severe aplastic anemia achieved complete remission. The crushing blow came next, however, because it's still considered experimental, insurance won't cover it. The total cost of the treatment, hospitalization, and follow-up care would be approximately $85,000. Noah and I exchanged glances, the same calculations running through both our minds. We had good insurance through his job, but it wouldn't touch experimental treatments. Our savings, already strained by the frequent trips to Kendall's wedding events, couldn't come close to covering such an expense. We owned a modest home with some equity, but nowhere near enough. "We'll find a way," Noah said, firmly squeezing my hand. "Whatever it takes." That night we researched every possible funding option. Medical loans with crippling interest rates, second mortgages, crowdfunding platforms. Each path seemed insufficient or would leave us financially devastated for years to come. As I watched Ethan sleep fitfully, his small chest rising and falling beneath hospital blankets, an obvious but difficult solution presented itself. My parents had spent $230,000 on Kendall's wedding without hesitation. Surely they would help save their grandson's life for $85,000. Despite our complicated relationship, despite their frequent disapproval of my choices, this was different. This was Ethan, their only grandchild, an innocent child fighting for his life. The next morning I called my father's private line, something I rarely did. When he answered, I took a deep breath and explained Ethan's situation in detail: the failed standard treatments, the promising new protocol, and the financial barrier standing between our son and his best chance at survival. "It's $85,000. Dad," I concluded, my voice shaking slightly. "I wouldn't ask if there were any other way, but this is Ethan's life we're talking about. Your grandson." The silence that followed lasted so long I thought the connection had dropped. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "That's a significant amount of money, Maven. And, for an experimental treatment, have you explored all the conventional options? I explained again that we had, that the doctors were unanimous in recommending this approach given Ethan's deteriorating condition. Please, Dad, we're running out of time. I need to discuss this with your mother, he said finally. And consult with some medical contacts of my own. I can't just throw money at unproven procedures without due diligence. His response felt like a physical blow. Due diligence. While Ethan lay in a hospital bed growing weaker by the day, I wanted to scream about the $250,000 they'd thrown at floral arrangements and champagne fountains, but I swallowed my anger. This wasn't about winning an argument, it was about saving my son. Please talk to Mom and call me back as soon as possible, I managed. The doctors say we have a limited window of opportunity for this treatment to be most effective. 24 agonizing hours passed before my phone rang again. It was my mother, not my father, her voice carrying the practiced sympathy she used for social acquaintances experiencing difficulties. We've discussed your situation, she began, and the formal phrasing already told me what their answer would be. Your father has consulted with several medical colleagues, and they're concerned about the experimental nature of this treatment. The success rates you mentioned haven't been verified in long-term studies. I clutched the phone tighter. Mom, Ethan's doctor specialists in this exact condition are recommending this. They see his case every day, not your golfing buddies who haven't practiced medicine in years. Her voice cooled. There's no need for that tone, Maven. We're trying to make a rational decision here. Rational. I struggled to keep my voice down as I stepped into the hallway outside Ethan's room. There's nothing rational about refusing to help your dying grandson when you have the means. We're not refusing to help, she countered. We're suggesting you pursue standard treatments covered by your insurance. Experimental procedures are risky investments. That word investments triggered something in me. Like Kendall's wedding was an investment, $230,000 for a one-day party was a sound investment, but $85,000 to save Ethan's life is too risky. The silence that followed told me I'd struck a nerve. When she finally spoke again, her voice had the brittle quality it always took on when family matters threatened to breach the wall of appearances she'd built around our family. Your sister's wedding was different. It was a planned expense, a social necessity, and frankly an investment in her future security with an appropriate family. You chose a different path, Maven. You chose Noah, despite our reservations. You chose Minneapolis over Connecticut. You've always insisted on independence, and independence means handling your own family's needs. In that moment, the full truth of our family dynamic crystallized with devastating clarity. This wasn't about medical skepticism or financial prudence. This was about punishment for my deviation from their planned path, for choosing love over status, for daring to build a life based on my values rather than theirs. And now Ethan, my innocent child, would pay the price for my rebellion. Mom, I said, my voice now deadly calm. Are you telling me that you and Dad are refusing to help save your grandson's life because you're still angry? I didn't marry someone from your approved social circle. Don't be dramatic, she snapped. We're making a reasoned decision based on medical advice and financial responsibility. If you and Noah had established yourselves more securely, you wouldn't need to come to us with your hand out. The conversation ended shortly afterward, with no resolution and no help forthcoming. As I returned to Ethan's bedside, watching his chest rise and fall beneath the thin hospital blanket, something shifted permanently inside me. The last threads of illusion about my family of origin snapped, replaced by a cold clarity and a single driving purpose: I would save my son with or without their help. And once I did, the Collins family, as I had known it, would cease to exist for me. I sat in the hospital cafeteria, untouched coffee growing cold between my hands as I processed my parents' refusal. The sterile fluorescent lighting matched the emptiness I felt inside. Noah found me there, his face hopeful, until he saw my expression. They said no, I stated flatly, no emotion left to spare. Apparently, Ethan's life isn't a worthy investment. Noah's expression shifted from disbelief to a controlled anger I rarely saw in him. Did they give a reason? Nothing that makes any sense in a world where people love their grandchildren, I replied. But it doesn't matter. We're going to find another way. That night, after Ethan finally fell asleep, I created a crowdfunding page with trembling hands. The thought of publicly exposing our family crisis, of essentially begging strangers for help, went against everything in my private nature. But pride had no place in this fight. I uploaded pictures of Ethan healthy and laughing in our backyard last summer, and more recent ones showing his pale face in the hospital bed, and explained his condition and the treatment he needed. I set the goal at $85,000, a number that seemed insurmountable, and pressed publish before I could reconsider. Noah contacted every member of his family, many of whom were already stretched thin financially. I reached out to college friends, former colleagues, neighbors, anyone who might be able to contribute even small amounts. The early responses were encouraging, but nowhere near what we needed. 5 days in, we'd raised just over $12,000, generous by normal standards, but a fraction of our goal with Ethan's condition deteriorating daily. On the 6th day, I received an unexpected visitor at the hospital. My childhood friend, Lily Chen, now a successful journalist, had seen my crowdfunding post shared by a mutual acquaintance. We hadn't spoken in years, our lives having taken different directions after college, but she arrived with a determined expression and a proposition. "I want to help," she said, simply sitting beside me in the quiet corner of the hospital's family room, "and I think I know how." Lily explained that she now worked for a major digital media outlet, specializing in human interest stories. "Your situation, it highlights everything wrong with our healthcare system and family dynamics. A $250,000 wedding versus a life-saving treatment denied, that's a story people need to hear." I hesitated. Going public meant exposing not just my parents' decision but our entire family history. It meant burning bridges permanently. "I don't know, Lily. It feels like using Ethan's illness." "It's not using him if it saves him," she countered gently. "And this isn't just about Ethan. Think of other families facing similar situations without any platform or voice." After discussing it with Noah, we agreed to Lily's proposal with one condition: we would not name my parents directly in the article. Despite everything, some vestige of family loyalty, or perhaps just ingrained privacy, made me draw that line. Lily agreed, and the interview took place that afternoon in Ethan's hospital room, his sleeping presence a constant reminder of what was at stake. The article went live 3 days later with the headline, "Parents, spend $230 kelvins on daughter's wedding, refuse $85 kelvins to save grandson's life." Even without names, the details made the story identifiable to anyone who knew our family. The piece was measured and factual, avoiding sensationalism while highlighting the brutal contrast between extravagant social spending and life-or-death healthcare needs. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The article went viral, shared hundreds of thousands of times across social platforms. Our crowdfunding page linked in the story began receiving donations at a rate that crashed the website temporarily. Media outlets picked up the story, expanding it with discussions about healthcare access, family obligations, and social priorities. By nightfall, we'd not only reached our $85,000 goal, but exceeded it by nearly $30,000. Messages of support flooded in from around the world, parents who understood our desperation, survivors of family estrangement offering solidarity, medical professionals volunteering their services. In the midst of this outpouring, I received a text message from my sister Kendall. "Just saw the article. I had no idea things were this bad. Can we talk?" Kendall had been difficult to reach throughout Ethan's illness, first because of her extended honeymoon, and then due to what my mother called adjustment to married life. Our brief conversations had been superficial with my parents, apparently filtering information about Ethan's true condition. Now her message suggested she was finally understanding the gravity of the situation. I agreed to a call that evening, stepping outside the hospital while Noah stayed with Ethan. When Kendall's face appeared on my screen, I was struck by how tired she looked. None of the glowing bride energy from her wedding remained. "Is it really as bad as the article says?" she asked immediately. Mom told me Ethan was responding well to standard treatments. "He's not," I replied, simply. "He needs this experimental procedure, and soon. That's why we've gone public with our fundraising." Kendall was silent for a moment, her expression troubled. "I didn't know, Maven, I swear. Dad just said you were being dramatic and wanted them to pay for unnecessarily expensive treatments." The familiar dismissal stung, but I was beyond being hurt by my parents' opinions. "The specialists at one of the top pediatric hospitals in the country disagree with Dad's medical assessment. Funny how that works." "I believe you," she said, surprising me. "And I want to help." What came next was even more surprising. Kendall explained that she'd received a substantial wedding gift from our maternal grandmother, a check for $100,000, that our parents had encouraged her to put toward a vacation home. The money was still sitting in a separate account, untouched. "I want you to have it for Ethan's treatment," she said firmly. "All of it." I was momentarily speechless. Despite our complicated relationship, despite years of subtle competition fostered by our parents, here was my sister offering everything she had to save my son. "Kendall, that's... I don't know what to say." "What about Bradley? It's his money too now." A shadow crossed her face. "Bradley doesn't know about this account. And honestly, things aren't great between us right now. But that's not important. What matters is that Ethan gets the treatment he needs." "Mom and Dad will be furious," I warned. "Let them be," she responded with unexpected steel in her voice. "I'm starting to see some things more clearly these days." While we no longer needed the money thanks to the crowdfunding success, Kendall's offer represented something perhaps even more valuable, an ally within the family I thought had abandoned us completely. We agreed that she would contribute $20,000 to help with the additional expenses we'd face during Ethan's recovery, specialized home care medications not covered by insurance, and the income lost during our extended hospital stay. The following morning brought another surprise. As I was completing paperwork to initiate Ethan's treatment process, a notification appeared on my phone. The crowdfunding total had jumped by another $85,000, exactly matching our original goal with an anonymous donation. The timing was suspicious, and I couldn't help wondering if my parents had reconsidered after the public exposure. Part of me wanted to reject the money if it came from them, a pride response I couldn't afford when Ethan's life hung in the balance. I never confirmed the source of that anonymous donation. Instead, I focused on what mattered. Within 10 days of my parents' refusal, we had secured the funds for Ethan's treatment through a combination of public support, family rebellion, and possibly reluctant parental guilt. The next phase of our journey began with hope, as we prepared Ethan for the innovative procedure. The medical team at Johns Hopkins welcomed us with compassion and confidence, the specialist who would lead the treatment, explaining each step with clarity that eased some of our terror. As they prepared my son for the first phase of treatment, I held his small hand and made another silent promise. This experience would reshape not just his blood cells, but our entire family system. The old patterns of conditional love and material values over human ones would end with my generation. Watching Ethan being wheeled away for the procedure that might save his life. A procedure made possible not by the wealth of his grandparents but by the collective generosity of strangers and the unexpected loyalty of my sister. I felt something shift within me. The hurt of my parents' betrayal remained, but its power over me was diminishing, replaced by a new understanding of what family truly meant. If you're still with me on this emotional journey, I can't thank you enough for listening. Life throws us the most unexpected challenges, doesn't it? What would you do if faced with a family betrayal this deep? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to see how this family drama continues to unfold, hit that subscribe button, because the treatment was just the beginning of this story, and karma was about to make its appearance in ways none of us could have predicted. The specialized treatment facility at Johns Hopkins became our world for the next 6 weeks. The medical procedure itself, a combination of gene therapy and modified bone marrow transplant, took place over 3 intensive days. But the recovery and monitoring phase stretched on, as Ethan's body either accepted or rejected this radical intervention. Every day brought new data points, blood tests, and cautious updates from the medical team. Dr. Miranda Patel, the lead specialist overseeing Ethan's case, became our guide through this unfamiliar terrain. The initial cellular response is promising, she told us a week after the procedure, her careful optimism like water in a desert. His modified cells are beginning to function as we hoped. But we need to remain vigilant about infection risks and potential complications. Vigilance became our constant state. Noah and I established a rotation, so one of us was always with Ethan, while the other grabbed brief periods of sleep in the nearby hotel. We learned to interpret every number on his charts, to recognize subtle changes in his coloring, to distinguish between normal post-procedure discomfort and warning signs. The hospital staff, witnessing our dedication, began treating us less as visitors and more as auxiliary members of Ethan's care team. Throughout this period, my sister Kendall maintained regular contact, checking in daily via text and video calls with Ethan when he felt strong enough. Her support provided an unexpected comfort, a tenuous thread connecting me to my former family life, while reinforcing that new alignments were possible. In contrast, my parents remained conspicuously absent despite knowing exactly where we were and what Ethan was undergoing. 2 weeks after the procedure, while Ethan napped during a brief period of improved energy, I received an unexpected call from my father. Stepping into the hallway, I answered with trepidation. "The hospital billing department just contacted me," he said, without preamble. "Apparently you've listed me as a secondary financial contact." I hadn't, of course. The hospital must have used old insurance information from when Ethan was briefly covered under my parents' premium family plan, during a gap in Noah's employment. "That's a mistake," I replied stiffly. "We've covered all expenses through the fundraising campaign." "Yes, about that campaign." His voice took on the tone he used for business negotiations. "Your mother and I have consulted with our attorney. The public nature of your fundraising, with details that make our family identifiable, borders on defamation." The absurdity of his concern momentarily stunned me. "Defamation requires false statements, Dad. Everything in that article was factually accurate. It presented a one-sided narrative, deliberately designed to damage our reputation and business interests," he continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Several of our clients have mentioned seeing it. The Whitfields are extremely concerned about association with this spectacle." I leaned against the sterile hospital wall, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. "My son is fighting for his life 10 feet away from where I'm standing, and you're worried about country club gossip." "This isn't about gossip," he snapped. "It's about responsibility and discretion. Family matters should remain private. Your public solicitation for funds was unnecessary and damaging." Unnecessary. The word ignited something in me. "You made it necessary when you refused to help Ethan. We made a considered decision based on medical advice." "No," I interrupted, surprising us both with my firmness. "You made a punitive decision based on your disappointment that I didn't follow your prescribed life path. You spent nearly $250,000 on Kendall's wedding because she did what you wanted. You refused $85,000 to save Ethan because I didn't. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken family history. When my father spoke again, his voice carried a coldness I'd never heard before, even during our worst disagreements. If that's how you choose to interpret our decisions, I see little point in continuing this conversation. Your mother and I will be consulting further with our attorney about potential remedies for the damage you've caused to our family name. Go ahead, I responded, a strange calm settling over me. But understand this threatening legal action against your daughter while your grandson fights for his life is a decision that can't be undone. Some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. Is that a threat? He demanded. No, Dad. It's just the truth about consequences. Real ones, not the kind you can fix with money or social connections. After ending the call, I stood motionless in the hospital hallway, absorbing what had just happened. This wasn't just another family disagreement, it was a fundamental breaking point. My father had chosen pride appearances and social standing over his grandson's life, and then doubled down with legal threats when exposed. Some decisions reveal character in ways that can never be unseen. Noah found me there, concern etched on his tired face. What happened? I explained the conversation in a detached voice that didn't sound like my own. Noah's expression hardened the protective instinct that made him an extraordinary father, now extending to shield me as well. They're showing you exactly who they are, he said quietly. And I'm so sorry, but maybe it's better to know the truth. He was right. Painful as this severing felt, there was clarity in it, a burning away of illusions about my family that I'd carried since childhood. I'd spent years trying to earn approval that had always been conditional, believing that beneath their disappointment in my choices was genuine love. Now I understood their love had always been for the daughter they wanted me to be, not the woman I actually was. As weeks passed, Ethan's condition began to show promising improvements. His blood count stabilized, then slowly improved. Color returned to his cheeks and brief bursts of energy allowed him to sit up and play simple games. Dr. Patel's cautious optimism evolved into genuine confidence. The modified cells are functioning beautifully, she told us, during the 4th week after treatment. His bone marrow is beginning to produce healthy blood cells again. We're not out of the woods yet, but these are exactly the indicators we hope to see at this stage. During this period, Kendall's support continued, though, in increasingly secretive ways. She confided that our parents had discovered her financial contribution to Ethan's care, and reacted with fury, accusing her of family betrayal and financial irresponsibility. Rather than backing down, this pressure seemed to strengthen her resolve. I'm seeing Mom and Dad clearly for the first time, she admitted during one of our late-night calls. All those years I thought following their rules meant they loved me more. Now I realize they just controlled me more. Her marriage to Bradley was deteriorating rapidly. The perfect society husband had revealed himself to be controlling and emotionally cold once the wedding spectacle ended. He'd reacted with contempt to Kendall's decision to help with Ethan's treatment, calling it fiscally irresponsible sentimentality. He sounds exactly like Dad, I observed. That's what I finally realized, Kendall replied softly. I married the man they groomed me to want. By the 6th week, the medical team cleared Ethan for discharge with an intensive home care plan and regular follow-up appointments. Leaving the hospital felt like emerging from a long tunnel, disorienting but filled with tentative light. Ethan, though still weak and requiring careful monitoring, was visibly recovering. His blood work showed consistent improvement and the sparkle had returned to his eyes. Our return to Minneapolis brought new challenges. Noah had taken extended leave from his position, and while his company had been supportive, our financial situation was precarious, despite the crowdfunding surplus. The medical bills continued beyond the initial treatment, with specialized medications and follow-up care creating ongoing expenses. Yet even these practical difficulties couldn't diminish our profound gratitude for Ethan's improving health. 3 months after the treatment, we received the news we'd been hoping for. Ethan's bone marrow was functioning normally, producing healthy blood cells at stable levels. He would require ongoing monitoring, but Dr. Patel officially classified him as in remission, with an excellent long-term prognosis. That night, Noah and I held each other and cried the first tears of joy we'd shed in what felt like a lifetime. Throughout this period, the silence from my parents remained absolute. They made no inquiries about Ethan's condition, sent no messages of concern or support. Their absence, once painful, now felt like a clarification, a simplification of our lives that removed the constant undercurrent of disapproval and conditional acceptance. 6 months after Ethan's successful treatment, our family had established a new normal. Ethan returned to preschool part-time, his energy returning in steady waves. Noah resumed his full work schedule with a promotion that recognized his dedication through our family crisis. I began freelance writing from home, sharing our healthcare journey in ways that advocated for other families navigating similar challenges. The first indication that something had changed in my parents' world came through Kendall, who called one evening with unusual urgency in her voice. "Have you heard about Dad's company?" she asked without preamble. I hadn't. My deliberate disconnection from family news had been part of my healing process. "What about it?" "It's in trouble, serious trouble. The FBI raided the main dealership yesterday. It's all over the local news." Within minutes, I was scanning news articles describing a major federal investigation into Collins luxury automobiles for alleged financial fraud, tax evasion, and illegal business practices. My father's name featured prominently with mentions of systematic documentation falsification and multi-million-dollar discrepancies. "This isn't just bad publicity they can manage away," Kendall explained, her insider knowledge still current, despite her growing estrangement from our parents. "Bradley's father sits on the board of their main banking institution. He says they're freezing all business accounts pending investigation." The news should have perhaps satisfied some vindictive part of me, some sense that karma had finally caught up with my father's ruthless business practices. Instead, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: concern for my mother, who would be facing social humiliation, worry for employees who might lose livelihoods, and a hollow recognition that even this wouldn't likely change my parents' fundamental values. Over the following weeks, the situation deteriorated rapidly. More dealerships were raided, executives were interviewed by federal agents, and long-standing business partners publicly distanced themselves from the Collins name. The Whitfields, Bradley's powerful family, announced the unfortunate necessity of severing all financial ties with Collins Enterprises, dealing a devastating blow to my parents' social standing. Then came the most unexpected development of all. 8 months after our confrontation in the hospital hallway, I received a text message from my mother. "Please call when you can. It's important." After considerable deliberation and discussion with Noah, I returned the call the following day. My mother answered immediately, her voice lacking its usual composed precision. "Thank you for calling back," she said, an unfamiliar humility in her tone. "I wasn't sure you would." "What's important, Mom?" I asked, maintaining emotional distance. She hesitated before continuing. "Your father has been indicted on multiple federal charges. The legal expenses, they're substantial. We've had to liquidate significant assets, and there are restrictions on accessing many of our accounts." I waited, sensing there was more to this call than a family news update. "The Connecticut house has been listed as collateral for your father's bail and legal representation," she continued. "We're downsizing to the lake house while this proceeds." The lake house, their vacation property, that they'd always considered merely adequate at 2,800 square feet. The downgrade from their 7,500 square foot main residence would feel catastrophic to them. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully, still uncertain where this conversation was heading. "The thing is," my mother continued, her voice faltering slightly, "we've been reflecting on our priorities during this difficult time. Family should come first. I was hoping we might reconnect. Perhaps you could bring Ethan to visit, we've barely seen him, and with everything so uncertain now, the request struck me with its transparent timing. After refusing to help save Ethan's life and threatening legal action when we found help elsewhere, they now wanted family connection when their social world was collapsing, when former friends were abandoning them, when they needed the appearance of family unity to soften their public image. Let me understand, I said slowly. When we needed you, when Ethan's life was at stake, you refused to help and then threatened to sue us. Now that you're facing legal troubles and social isolation, you want to reconnect. That's not fair, Maven, my mother protested weakly. We were operating on the medical information available to us at the time. And your father's legal situation has given us perspective on what truly matters. What truly matters, I repeated the words hollow. And what is that exactly? Because less than a year ago, what mattered was appearances, status, and punishment for my life choices. People can change, she insisted. Difficult circumstances can provide clarity. I thought about Ethan, about how close we'd come to losing him. I thought about the strangers who had contributed to his treatment when his own grandparents refused. I thought about Kendall's courage in defying our parents to help her nephew. And I thought about the years of conditional love that had shaped my own insecurities and need for approval. Yes, difficult circumstances do provide clarity, I agreed. My clarity came in a pediatric hospital room, watching my son fight for his life, without his grandparents' support. We'd like a chance to make amends, my mother said quietly. I closed my eyes, centering myself in the person I had become through our ordeal. I appreciate that, Mom, I really do. But reconciliation requires more than convenience or necessity. It requires genuine accountability, changed behavior over time, and rebuilt trust. Those things can't happen in a single phone call or visit. What are you saying? Her voice sharpened with familiar impatience. I'm saying that if you're genuinely interested in being part of our lives again, it begins with acknowledging what happened, really acknowledging it, not explaining it away. It means understanding the harm caused and making authentic amends. It means rebuilding relationship for the right reasons, not because you suddenly need family connection in a crisis. The silence stretched between us, filled with decades of family patterns, expectations, and hurt. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice small and unfamiliar. I don't know how to do that. I know, I replied, surprising myself with the compassion in my voice. That's the first honest thing you've said to me in years. Maybe that's where we start, with honesty about who we are and what we actually need from each other. And Ethan, will we see him eventually, perhaps? But not as a prop in a family reconciliation narrative, and not until I'm confident the relationship is healthy. He deserves grandparents who value him for who he is, not for how he fits into a family image. After ending the call, I sat in our sunlit kitchen, a strange peace settling over me. The conversation hadn't gone as my mother had hoped, but perhaps it had gone as it needed to. For the first time in our relationship, I had spoken my truth without seeking approval or fearing rejection. The outcome wasn't a tidy reconciliation, but something more valuable, the first tentative step toward an honest relationship, whatever form that might eventually take. That evening, as Noah and I watched Ethan playing in our backyard, his energy and color fully returned. I shared the conversation with my mother and my mixed feelings about their sudden interest in family connection. Noah considered this thoughtfully. You know, in engineering we have this principle: pressure reveals structural weaknesses. Their financial and social pressure is revealing who they truly are, just as our medical crisis revealed their priorities before. The question is whether this revelation changes anything fundamental, I mused. That's up to them, Noah replied. But either way, you've shown Ethan what really matters, that love isn't conditional, that family is about showing up when it counts, and that sometimes the family we choose is more reliable than the family we're born into. Looking at our son healthy and vibrant against all odds because of strangers' generosity and his aunt's courage rather than his grandparents' wealth, I recognize the powerful lesson embedded in our painful journey. Some family bonds are determined by blood, but the strongest ones are forged through choice, courage, and unconditional love, a lesson I would make sure Ethan carried forward into his own life story. 1 year after Ethan's successful treatment, we celebrated with a small gathering in our backyard. The weather cooperated, perfectly warm sunshine, a gentle breeze, and the kind of perfect blue sky that seems to promise unlimited possibilities. Ethan, now 5 years old and fully recovered, raced around the yard with neighborhood friends, his laughter, the sweetest sound I'd ever known. "It's hard to believe how far we've come," Noah said, slipping his arm around my waist as we watched the children play. "Remember where we were this time last year?" I leaned into his embrace, grateful beyond words for his steadfast presence throughout our ordeal. Every day, I don't think I'll ever take a single moment of his health for granted. Our celebration included the people who had truly shown up for us during our crisis, neighbors who had organized meal trains, Noah's colleagues who had donated vacation days so he could stay with Ethan during treatment, Lily, whose article had mobilized public support, and of course Kendall, who had arrived the previous day for an extended visit. My sister's transformation over the past year had been remarkable. After her initial stand against our parents to support Ethan's treatment, she had found the courage to leave her unhappy marriage to Bradley. The divorce proceedings had been contentious and public, with the Whitfield family using their considerable influence to paint Kendall as unstable and financially irresponsible. The final settlement had left her with far less than she deserved, but as she repeatedly told me, freedom was worth every penny. Kendall now rented a small apartment near us in Minneapolis and was pursuing a degree in child psychology, a longtime interest our parents had discouraged as impractical. Watching her interact with Ethan, her genuine warmth and attentiveness evident in every interaction, I marveled at how adversity had revealed her true character and strengths. "Auntie Ken, watch this," Ethan called, preparing to demonstrate a cartwheel he'd been practicing. Kendall gave him her full attention, applauding his wobbly but enthusiastic attempt with genuine delight. "Perfect form, buddy, you're going to be ready for the Olympics soon," she encouraged, high-fiving him as he ran back for another try. Later, as afternoon transitioned to evening, and our guests gradually departed, Kendall and I sat on the patio with glasses of wine, watching the fireflies begin their nightly dance across the yard. "Have you heard from Mom and Dad recently?" she asked, the question gentle but direct. I nodded. "Mom calls about once a month. The conversations are evolving." My parents' legal troubles had continued to unfold throughout the year. My father had eventually accepted a plea deal that included substantial fines, business restrictions, and community service, but avoided prison time. Their financial situation, while still comfortable by most standards, had contracted dramatically. Most significantly, their social standing in the community they'd prioritized for decades had been irrevocably damaged. These external changes had catalyzed some genuine introspection, particularly for my mother. Our monthly calls had progressed from awkward attempts to restore the old dynamic to more authentic, if sometimes difficult, conversations about our family patterns and the harm they had caused. She asked about seeing Ethan again last week, I shared with Kendall. I told her we could consider a short visit over the holidays if certain conditions are met. "What conditions?" Kendall asked. "A formal acknowledgement of what happened during Ethan's illness. No attempts to rewrite that history or justify their decisions. And a commitment to relating to him as he is, not as a prop in a family narrative, or a second chance to shape a child according to their expectations." Kendall nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think they can do that? Really do it, not just say the right words?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Mom might be capable of genuine change. The jury's still out on Dad. But either way, I'm approaching any reconciliation with clear eyes and strong boundaries." Ethan deserves that protection, and honestly, so do I. So do we both. Kendall agreed, raising her glass in a small toast. As darkness fell, Noah lit the string lights around our patio, creating a warm glow that encircled our small family gathering. Ethan, tired from a day of play but resisting bedtime, curled up on my lap, his body warm and solid against mine. "Tell me the story again, Mommy," he requested, his voice drowsy. "The one about how I got better." This had become a bedtime ritual in recent months, Ethan asking for what he called my special story. I'd crafted a child-appropriate version of his illness and recovery, emphasizing the doctors who had helped him, the community that had supported us, and the strength he had shown throughout his treatment. Once upon a time, I began smoothing his hair. There was a very brave little boy who got sick with an illness that made him very tired. As I continued the familiar narrative, highlighting the doctor's special medicine and the many people who had helped us, I caught Noah and Kendall exchanging smiles across the table. This story, this framing of our family crisis, was part of how we were all healing, turning trauma into a tale of resilience, community, and unconditional love. When I reached the conclusion, and the brave little boy got stronger every day until he could run and play again, making his family the happiest family in the world, Ethan was nearly asleep, his eyes heavy but still focused on my face. "And the grandparents?" he asked, sleepily deviating from our usual script. "Why didn't they help?" The question caught me off guard. We had never hidden the basic truth from him that my parents hadn't been part of his treatment journey, but we had carefully avoided burdening him with adult complexity or encouraging resentment. "Sometimes," I said carefully, "grown-ups make mistakes because they don't understand what really matters. Your grandparents didn't understand then, but they're learning now. The important thing is that you got better, and you are so loved by so many people." He seemed satisfied with this answer, nestling deeper into my arms as sleep overtook him. Noah gently lifted him from my lap, carrying him upstairs to bed, while Kendall and I remained on the patio, the comfortable silence between us filled with shared understanding. "You know," Kendall said, "finally I've been thinking about starting a foundation. Using what's left of my divorce settlement and grandmother's gift. Something to help families access experimental treatments when insurance won't cover them." "That's perfect," I replied, genuinely moved by how she was transforming her own pain and privilege into purpose. "What would you call it?" "I was thinking, the Ethan Fund," she said, a question in her voice. "If that's okay with you both." Tears pricked at my eyes. "More than okay, it's beautiful." As the night deepened around us, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year, not just Ethan's medical recovery, but our family's transformation. The crisis that had nearly broken us had instead reformed us into something stronger, more authentic, and ultimately more loving. The conditional relationships that had defined my childhood had been replaced by chosen bonds based on genuine care and shared values. The Collins family would never return to what it had been before Ethan's illness and my parents' refusal to help. But perhaps that was ultimately for the best. In its place, something new was emerging, something built on honesty, accountability, and the recognition that true family loyalty isn't about maintaining appearances or conforming to expectations. It's about showing up when it matters most, standing firm in difficult moments, and loving without conditions or price tags. As Ethan slept peacefully upstairs, his body continuing its remarkable healing journey, I made one final promise to myself: the legacy of conditional love would end with my generation. My son would grow up knowing his worth wasn't measured by compliance or achievement, but by the simple, profound truth of his inherent value as a human being. And that lesson, learned through our family's darkest hour and brightest redemption, would be the most valuable inheritance I could possibly give him. If my story has touched you in any way, I'd be so grateful to hear about it. Have you experienced similar family dynamics, where money or status was prioritized over what truly matters? Or maybe you've witnessed the incredible power of community coming together during a crisis. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories about family relationships healing and the unexpected ways karma works in our lives, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Thank you so much for listening to my journey. I truly believe that by sharing our stories, we create connection and healing that ripples far beyond what we can see. Until next time, remember that true family is defined by love, not DNA.